This is an interesting question, and it's one that I think needs to be asked, which is, let me just change it to New York State. You have a governor, Cuomo, who's a Democrat and a liberal, who actually is acting more fiscally conservative than most of the conservatives in the government of running the United States of America on a federal level. He said today, we cannot afford to continue running these kind of deficits, and he wants to cut back on health. He wants people to cut back on pensions, things like that. Do you think he's going to be successful? I mean, you obviously would agree with him, correct?
Well, I agree, and it's not like agreeing. You have no choice. We have tremendous deficits in New York. You can't raise taxes because everyone's just going to leave. So it's not like he has a choice. But so far, he's sending out lots of good signals.
Yeah, but here in California, we have a governor, Jerry Brown, who says we need more tax hikes or we're going to have Egyptian-style unrest here. Doesn't he realize that the earners are going to leave this state if he keeps it up? We're all going to move to Florida, and we're all going to try to join Mar-a-Lago?
That's right. They'll all come down to Florida, and they'll be members of my Mar-a-Lago club. But I have clubs in California, too. I have a great golf course in California, phenomenal, in Rancho Palos Verdes. And I will tell you, people are angry in California at the taxes and the tax struggle. They have a struggle in California, and I was surprised. I know Jerry Brown very well, and I was very surprised. He's actually talking about raising taxes, and I don't...
A shocker, because he's posed himself as a moderate. Do you know the upper income in this state pays about 10.5% state tax on top of the federal tax?
Unbelievable.
10.5% state tax in this state. Florida, 0.
That's right. A lot of people moving down to Florida.
Yeah, I understand why. Now, let's go into some of the other entitlements, Mr. Trump. You know, say entitlements. The word itself puts my flesh on edge, because as far as I'm concerned, the only entitlement we have on earth is death and taxes, as someone wiser than I said. Where is it written that Medicare can't require higher co-payments and that Social Security can't be cut by a few percent each year, or that federal employees can't have their pensions cut by 2% a year for the next 5 years? Why should federal workers have it better than the average American worker?
Well, the politicians don't like to get into Medicare. They don't like to get into Social Security. And I even noticed that the Republicans, who are very conservative, don't want to talk about Social Security and Medicare. And maybe you'll have to talk to them. It's a very complex subject. But, you know, I view it differently. I don't like playing around with Social Security and Medicare. You know, people need it. Now, I will say this. Someday soon, I'm going to get a Social Security check. I shouldn't be getting a Social Security check.
Wait a minute. Let me enjoy that laugh. What are you going to do, gamble in Atlantic City with it?
Security check. And people that make a lot of money, they don't even know. They won't even know they got it. Okay.
Right.
And there are people that make so much money, they literally wouldn't even know that they got it. So at a certain point, maybe you should start looking at that. But I will say this.
But wait a minute. How about cutting the Social Security for people who aren't even citizens? And how about raising the retirement age by 2 years? They did that in France recently. There were riots, and then the riots were suppressed, and it was over. Why don't we just raise the retirement age by 2 years?
Michael, what the current politicians want to do is go back to raising for people that aren't born because they're afraid that maybe they'll lose a vote. But that's not going to be the thing. The thing that we should be doing is taxing China, is taxing Mexico, who's taking a lot of jobs out.
Right.
Is taxing India, where we have everybody working in India in the credit card business. Everybody's working in India. You have a problem with your credit card, you're calling up somebody in India to straighten it out. We should be for outsourcing. If somebody wants to outsource to India, I think that's great. Let them pay a tax, a big fat tax, and then you'd be able to lower taxes. Because you say what you want about taxes in this country. We pay the highest taxes in the world. And the reason is that every country, so many countries, in particular China, is eating our lunch.
I agree with you. We're going to ask the callers. Maybe one will have the luck to get on with Donald Trump here on the Savage Nation. The minute we come back from our commercial break, one question for Donald Trump, whether it be on Egypt or domestic policies. Also, during the break, while listening to the commercial messages, you can go on to shouldtrumprun.com. I'll be right back.
Savage.
speaking with one of America's most well-known businessmen. He's also a very famous media personality, Donald Trump, and I believe he should run for the presidency for a couple of reasons. You say, well, why? Number one, he's a businessman, and in my book, Trickle Up Poverty, I conclude by saying run the country like a business, not an empire. Number two, he has an immense capacity for paying attention to detail, as I know from the buffet table at his club, and I'm not joking about that. You can judge everything by a buffet table. Right now, we're going to ask Donald Trump a most important question. Mr. Trump, Al Gore has been quoted today as saying the blizzards that are hitting America are caused by global warming. What do you have to say to Al Gore?
I am so tired of this global warming nonsense. It is so ridiculous. And I don't know if you know what we're doing. We're retooling our factories so that we can't compete against China and others in order to protect against global warming, which doesn't exist. We have the coldest winter in New York that I can never remember. I've been around a long time, and I have never seen snow after snow, storm after storm. People can't leave their buildings, and I'm hearing about global warming. And then these global warming guys, they always have an answer. They say, oh, no, the extremely cold weather is another sign of global warming.
Right. They say that the havoc that's being created as a result of the hotter, dry spells caused by their science, which is all based on fraud. No, it's crazy, but there's a very serious policy. There are very serious policy mistakes being made based on this fraudulent science. Look at the contracts being given over to so-called green energy. A study was done in Scotland. It showed that each kilowatt of energy driven by windmills costs far more than that driven by hydroelectric or even that by coal-fired plants.
Right. That's right. Well, what's going on is absolutely insane. And I always ask the question, as you have these factory owners that are going out of business, trying to gear up for global warming so that we don't warm up the planet, I say, do you think really that China is gearing up their factories? Have you ever been to China and seen their factories? They are spewing coal and spewing garbage. And I'm not saying that's the right thing, but I will tell you, they're not believers in global warming other than with their mouths. They talk about global warming. And this country, what we're doing to our factories, we're making it impossible for these people to produce goods and services at a fair price. So when I
tariffs on China, we both agree on tariffs on China and getting some leadership in the military to use our military, to charge for the use of our military, as you've said with South Korea, for example. I believe we should have sent our military to both sides of the Suez Canal and protect the Suez Canal from any takeover. But thus far, not one word from anyone in the government with regard to using our military properly. Donald Trump, when are you going to decide? After The Apprentice is over?
I'm going to decide, sometime in June, during the month of June.
Well, let's hope that you do run, because America does need a very serious businessman to run the country, not a career politician. I'd recommend people go to the independent website, shouldtrumprun.com, and, see what's on there. Any final words here for the audience on the Savage Nation?
Well, I just say this, Michael. We're not a respected country anymore. That's why it's Egypt and Tunisia that's rioting, not other countries that we don't control. They don't respect us. They don't like us, but I think it's even beyond like anymore. They don't respect us, a much more important word. And if I do decide to run, I can guarantee you one thing, we'll be respected again as a country.
Remember what Teddy Roosevelt said, walk softly and carry a big stick? I think with Obama we have a guy who walks softly and carries no stick.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Thanks, Donald Trump. A pleasure to have you on the Savage Nation. When I return, your calls and more, all the news, what's going on in Egypt and the Middle East. There's a new story out saying Iran is saying this is the beginning of an Islamic empire.